In life, shows, books, women are obligated to the role of a damsel in distress whose only salvation is a Prince Charming. We have Elizabeth Swann from Pirates of the Caribbean, MJ from Spider-Man, Jasmine of Aladdin, and Vivian Ward from Pretty Woman. There are just too many of them and so little representation of strong, independent women. And sometimes when we get one, they are often portrayed as cold, emotionless, or with different intentions. That's just the representation we grew up with. Women are fragile, delicate, emotional, and not just as capable. Often our roles are for romance, to highlight men's strength, to give them some purpose, an opportunity to show their masculinity. In our language, babae lang kasi.
And there are just too many things that society dictates about women. Sadly, this belief perpetuates not just because of our culture and belief. There's also science to back it up. Of course, physically and biologically, men and women are very different. However, is it also the same case for our development? Well, according to Erickson's theory, the simple answer is yes. In the stage 5 of his theory, which is adolescence, he stated that man focuses on self-identity and role in society, while women focuses on their relationships and intimacy. So women draw out their self-identity from their relationships, so they are just often too immature and emotional. How can we trust a theory that is founded and supported by men's perspective and experience? Erickson's founded his theory based on the biological distinctiveness of men and women. Well, we already know that they are very different, right? And if you're going to talk about the strength of our bodies, nothing can handle what a woman has to go through every month and in childbirth. But instead of seeing this as a strength, they see it as a weakness. They see becoming a mother as a weakness because women cannot progress as much as men in their career. And whenever we get our period, we become really erratic, emotional even. But as psych students, we already know that women's participation in our field is very limited. So our experiences are not often explored. They are dictated. There are already biases that exist whenever they get data from women's experiences. And may I just add that women are not even allowed to go to school, not until the 1800s. So there are so many things that we have to catch up on. Well, going back to how society and science are very misogynist, we have Martina Horner's study in 1964. Her hypothesis is that women have this motive to avoid success. And as expected, 65% of her participants, which are women, agreed that they have anxiety when it comes to success, and only 8% of men agreed. And so she proceeded with the conclusion that women fear success. But she also found that because success have very negative consequences to women, they become less desired. They are viewed as less feminine, and they become less of what society dictates a woman should be. And her purpose is very good actually. She wanted to understand how this anxiety creates barriers for women to succeed, but it only created more internalized misogyny and perpetuated that there's something wrong with women and that they cannot really handle such roles like men. And her study became really famous. It was published in New York Times, The Times, and other publications, so it was very well known. However, Georgia Sasson contradicted the results of Horner's study because she found out that the anxiety that was being studied in Horner's research actually came from direct competition, meaning there's only one loser and one winner. George Sasson said that anxiety should not be the reason for women's fear of success because anxiety is very normal, especially when we're trying new things. And by saying that women fear success or that they have motive to avoid success, only supports the idea that we are living in a man's world, and rather we should encourage women to actually go out of their box and affirm what they bring to the table and that they can succeed just like men. So we really need more studies like Sassen's, one that consider the experiences and perspective of women, because society just keeps on affirming that women are too small, too weak, incapable, and that we cannot lead. But then society is too forgiving of men whose thoughts mostly involve brutality and women. So are they really more developed and morally right compared to women? Well, Virginia Woolf said that it is men's values that prevail. Virginia Woolf is one of the feminist authors who did not get the opportunity to go to university because society said that women should stay at home while men go out of their boxes to explore the world and to find their place. So she actually criticizes women's deference and confusion because it is one of their weakness, but it can actually stem from their strength. And given the era that she comes from, women are really expected to be submissive. And she criticizes this deference and confusion because women are actually very strong. Their weaknesses are their strengths as well because they're naturally empathetic and caring towards other people. And we are just locked in this idea that we are under control of our fathers, our brothers, and then later on, our husband.
I'm not a poet. I'm just a woman. And as a woman, there's no way for me to make my own money. Not enough to earn a living or to support my family. And if I had my own money, which I don't, that money would belong to my husband the moment we got married. And if we had children, they would be his, not mine. They would be his property. So don't sit there and tell me that marriage isn't an economic proposition, because it is. It may not be for you, but it most certainly is for me.
Virginia Woolf is probably disappointed that we still have a long way to go to put women in a position that is equal to men in our society.
I definitely agree with that one. But as a woman speaking and representing the 21st century, we see how women's role and representation have evolved and changed compared to how it was represented before. We see nowadays women excel in sports, are taking higher positions, and are independent. No more damsel in distress and thinking that women need saving. So let's talk about women. So women's role on a man's life cycle has always been that of a nurturer, caretaker, or helpmate. But while women have taken care of men, men have, in their theories of psychological development and economic arrangements, tended to devaluate that care. The qualities deemed necessary for adulthood are those associated with masculinity and attributes considered undesirable when associated to the feminine self. Take, for example, Luisa from Encanto. So Luisa represents a woman who is strong and independent and kind of like is the bolder of the family. We see that the audience had great acceptance of who Luisa's character was because of how women is represented today. So before, when the focus on adulthood and maturity is equated with personal autonomy, women's concern for relationship appears to be a sign of weakness, whereas men's desire for independence is a sign of strength and maturity. To measure moral judgment, Kohlberg's 6-stage scale was used, and it was created from data gathered from boys. Women were not included in his original sample, yet Kohlberg claims universality for his stages. The results of his study showed that women appear deficient, reaching only the 3rd stage, which is morality based on helping others. Kohlberg and Kramer implied that women can only reach the higher stages if they enter the public male realm. Now we wonder, aside from Kohlberg's theory of moral development, what other theories that we use and believe were universal are actually biased? Have we been believing to biased theories and frameworks all this time? When one begins with the study of women and derives developmental constructs from their lives like Freud, Piaget, and Kohlberg, the outline of moral conception begins to emerge and informs a different description of development. They use the man's life cycle as the norm for all human development, thus resulting to women's suppression. These theories influence how people became gendered and sexed, how femininity and masculinity developed, and how sexual inequality was reproduced. Again, on the topic of morality, so one time, a male and a female were interviewed on different studies regarding morality. Their answers were compared by Gilligan, and it showed that a male response illustrates Kohlberg's concept of morality, which is based on rights, separation, and individuality. While on the other hand, a young woman's response illustrates a concept of morality based on responsibility, connection, and relationships. Thus, while Kohlberg's subject, or the male, worries about interfering with each other's rights, the woman worries about the possibility of omission, of you not helping others when you could help them. Gilligan proposed that women come to prioritize an ethics of care as their sense of morality evolves along with their sense of self, while men prioritize an ethics of justice. It becomes clear why a morality of rights and non-interference may appear frightening to women in its potential justification of indifference and unconcern. At the same time, it becomes clear why, from a male perspective, a morality of responsibility appears inconclusive and diffuse given its insistent contextual relativism. The masculine right conception aims to resolve moral issues objectively, while the female's responsibility conception stresses the complex, imperfect nature of any resolution. The elusive mystery of woman's development lies in its recognition of the continuing importance of attachment in the human life cycle. Woman's place in a man's life cycle is to protect the recognition of social attachment in the human life cycle.
Hindi ito pambabae. Alam mo, the emotional setup of a woman and a man is totally different. Maging ka dito.
Now, come on, you're never gonna get the grades to qualify for one of those spots.
Kasi nahihiya kami kasi baka ma-open babae.
Women are much more than victims of war and conflict.
Champion of press freedom in the Philippines, Ressa is the first Filipino Nobel laureate.
Sino ang merong solid track record?
Sakaling may mapapadaan, pwede nilang ayusin yung pantry. Kung sakaling magdo-donate sila, pwede nilang i-ready na yung i-donate.
Babae ka, hindi babae lang.